permission of the court, may I proceed? Ms. West, I believe I spoke with you earlier about drugs that you were taking on the day in question for your mental illness. There are other drugs you were taking that day, aren't there?
One other one.
And that would be Vicodin?
Yes.
What's your understanding of Vicodin?
It's a pain medication.
Okay. And you were taking that for an injury?
In my left leg.
You had taken Vicodin that morning?
Yes.
And is it possible that the Vicodin or the interaction of the Vicodin that you were taking with these other drugs that were prescribed for you, is it possible that they might explain your behavior on March 21st?
It made me drowsy.
Well, something made you more than drowsy, didn't it?
No.
Ma'am, do you not recall speculating to the Glynn County Police Detective, Marissa Tyndall, and to Detective Smith about the person who did this to your child and his family? Do you not recall giving some bizarre statements to the police about the attackers who you had at that point not identified?
I don't recall.
At 4820, into your interview with the Glynn County Police Department, you told the police that he was a little delinquent and his mama was a crack whore, that daddy was not there, and that they probably took his food money to spend on crack cocaine. That's what you told the police you thought about the attacker.
I did say he was a delinquent.
You don't specifically remember telling the police that you figured that the child was starved by his parents because they were spending the money for his food on drugs.
No, I don't recall that.
And again, at 1:57:30, you told the police that the attackers had a whore, drug addict mother who didn't buy them food.
I didn't hear the first word. Was it poor?
Attackers had a whore, drug addict mother who didn't buy them food.
Poor or whore?
Whore, W-H-O-R-E.
I didn't know if it was poor or whore.
That's the way I heard it in the transcript.
I don't recall.
Ma'am, you don't find those bizarre statements to make about people you don't know?
Well, anybody would want to know why they were doing this. I asked him, why are you doing this? And he never said anything.
Ma'am, isn't it true that you were really referring to yourself?
No, that's not true. I've worked before my injuries.
Ma'am, did you not starve your daughter, Ashley Glassy?
Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant evidence. Extrinsic acts by a witness are not proper to impeach unless they deal with truthfulness or untruthfulness. And this is improper impeachment of this witness.
Your Honor, this jury is entitled to decide.
Your Honor, this should not be argued before the jury.
Well, then, Your Honor...
Rise. Let you go back out to the jury. All right, jury.
Be seated, please. Please be seated.
Record reflects the jury has been removed. All right, Mr. Goff, ask your question again, please. Don't answer. I just want to hear the question, okay?
Ma'am, when you described the attacker of the child twice as having starved their child because they were spending the food money on crack, you were describing yourself.
Okay. You object.
There was another question about her child, Ashley Glassy. She said no to that. It was the next question to which I objected.
Are you done? The next question was that you, in fact, starved your own child, Ashley Glassy.
And
That's what you objected to.
yes, Your Honor, and I'm objecting to that specifically under 608B.
Goff.
Your Honor, the issue is not 608B. The issue here is a confrontation issue. The fact is that this woman who lied to the police repeatedly during an interview about abusing her children had in fact abused her children. Specifically with respect to her son and daughter, she starved her children, which ties in a very chilling and disturbing way to her testimony. Arguably, she was taunting the police as the killer of the children, as the killer of Antonio Santiago, describing the killer as someone else, when in fact she's describing her very self, Your Honor. We've got Ashley Glassy here. We don't need the defects records from the state of New Jersey anymore. We know exactly what happened. She lost custody of her children. She lied to the police about it. She lost custody because she starved her child.
Hold. There has been no evidence before the court that she has lied to the police about these records. Okay? Has her?
No, we haven't asked that question
Absolutely.
yet. But what we have done, Your Honor, is we have gone in to bizarre statements that she made, which suggest that the attacker, that the shooter, was starving their child, when in fact she's the only person that's been starving anybody in this case. And that would be her own child, Your Honor. It couldn't fit together any more cleanly, Your Honor. It is a severe confrontation clause issue. This trial will come back if we cannot get into this
Well, the
issue.
Supreme Court may disagree with that, okay, and that's fine. But I'm going to follow the rules. I got Carlson open, I got Millick open, I got Westlaw open. I'm trying to find some relevancy and sanity in the fact that you just blurted out in front of this jury that you starved your daughter. And I don't know when, I don't know where. I mean, that statement just got blurted out. And I'm trying to find where is the relevancy as to, did you be able to just blurt that question out at a witness?
Your Honor,
How does the fact, assuming that she starved her daughter 10, 12 years ago or something, how does that now make it relevant on whether or not she killed her child?
Because she...
I don't put two and two together.
You know,
with that jump. I mean, right now. You might be able to show it later, but I mean, right now, to be able to say that question, how does the fact that you claim she starved her child sometime in the past?
Well, Your Honor, there's no claiming about it, you know. But, Your Honor, this witness gave very specific, bizarre descriptions about the attackers who weren't even identified at that point, which describes exactly her own behavior, Your Honor. And we're allowed to present that to the jury so the jury can conclude that she is, in fact,
Well, you asked her, and that
referring to
wasn't
herself.
objected to. You asked her, are you describing yourself when you made that comment? You asked that, and she said no. Okay? But then you just throw out, you starved your daughter 10 years. Well, you didn't say a time period. You just starved your daughter.
Well, Your Honor,
I mean, I don't,
look, if Mr. Economer wants, you know, we can go back and we can go ahead and present it through impeachment and then get it in that way. But it's going to come in one way or the other. And Mr., you know, I'm just trying not to be here till midnight, Judge.
Well, I want to know from you, right now I'm going to sustain that objection to that question. Now, we might as well go ahead and deal with this issue so we don't have the jury going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay?
Very well.
Okay? The court, I've already said that you can ask questions about, I mean, you feel like that she lied to the police about whether she had orange socks on or not, then you can ask, did you tell them you had orange socks on? In fact, you had blue socks. Okay? That's certainly, you can ask that question on cross-examination. Now, the real question gets to be, where do you go after that? Because, I mean, then that gets back to, you know, if I find if it's a non-collateral issue, then you can go into. If I find it's a collateral issue, then the law is that you have to, the cross-examiner may confront the witness with the contradiction, but must accept the witness's answer.
I understand the academic question. The practical reality, Your Honor, is how, in a case involving a dead baby where the parents are suspects, how can it possibly be said that abuse prior abuse of other children that they had is irrelevant and not logical to whether or not they abused this child?
How is...
And it's obviously impeachment because she lied about it.
Okay, well, I mean, its question is whether or not it's collateral to the issue we're trying. The issue we're trying is the guilt or innocence of your client. Okay? So, now, does the fact that she lied to the police about this matter, well, I'm not saying she did or didn't, but you're saying she did, okay? Assuming that assuming your question, how does that then allow you to go into her relationship with her children or issues she had with her children how many years ago?
Well, the witness, it would be 5 years ago, 7 years ago. No, I take it back. Miss Glassy was 8 at the time, and she is now 20. It would be 12 years.
12 years ago. Okay. So you're asking the court then to be able to go back in and relitigate the defects issue with her. She lost custody of her children. That's what you're claiming, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you want to go back in and relitigate the fact that she lost her children 12 years ago. And that she somehow in her statement to the police either minimized that or lied about it. Correct?
Yes.
I haven't seen the statement to the police, so I don't know. Which one is it? Is it she minimized it or does she just totally lied about it? What are you claiming?
I believe both, Your Honor. At one point she minimized, I believe at another point she lied about it. With all due respect, Your Honor, I'm trying to cross-reference a lot of information here. And it is now 6:30 at night,
Well, we have a jury. The jury has instructed, I'll say this for the record, the jury wants to, they understand, they're wide awake, they want to keep going. They've sent word to the court, they want to keep going. So we're going to keep going for a little while. But
that's fine. If Your Honor, if Your Honor will give me 5 minutes, I will find the references in the 2-hour interview to that.
Okay. So what you're really trying to do is to impeach her with this defect record.
Well, it's not a defects record. It's the testimony of her daughter, who we brought down pursuant to court order from New Jersey, Your Honor. But it is a three-pronged issue with respect to the admissibility of these things. One issue is whether or not it is impeachment. Another issue is whether or not it is logically relevant to our defense. Your Honor, you asked me a moment ago what the relevance was to my client's trial.
I want to know, let's start with that question first.
Okay.
That very concerns the court. I want to know what you're saying on the record so I can make a determination that assuming she either minimized or, in your opinion, minimized or lied about the defects investigation of her children, okay? How is that then relevant to go into that?
All right, well, I'm going to start back at the beginning, Your Honor, as the court mentioned earlier. The first question is whether or not it's logically relevant to our defense. Our defense is charged for murdering baby Antonio.
Your defense is what?
We are charged in the indictment with murdering baby Antonio. Our defense is in part is to suggest that someone else did it. And that is a logical defense and based in evidence already before the court, in addition to some not yet before the court. So that certainly it is certainly logically relevant if there's evidence tending to suggest that someone else may have killed the child. And that certainly is relevant. It's also,
but here, this begs the question then, that any person who's been involved in a custody suit with the state then is a suspect in the death of their child? Did that...
Certainly not in any case, Your Honor. It's a pretty rare case in my experience, and I think Your Honor would agree. It is a pretty rare case where someone is charged with killing a child that they come in and suggest that someone else, specifically the parents, may have been, one or both may have been involved. That's certainly not the usual case. And it's certainly not the usual case that there's actually evidence that would support those theories.
Okay. Assuming that she spanked a child, and I don't know what the evidence would show from I have no proof. Assuming that the evidence shows that she spanked her child too hard, okay? Then what does that prove other than just being pure character evidence? She was a bad mother.
The fact that she spanked her child or hit her child with a belt, which would probably be more accurate with respect to Sean Glassy, Your Honor, that would probably be relevant only with respect to impeachment. I think we can agree that hitting a child with a belt, that's not necessarily logically related. Probably there's a 403 issue with that. However, when the allegation of abuse is involving starvation and the parent...
Nobody's alleging that Antonio Santiago was starved.
No, Your Honor. But the
So I'm
statement...
asking, what does it prove? How does it, I guess I'm having a hard time making the jump, and counsel has it, other than just that she's a bad mother, and that doesn't, I mean, he doesn't quite get it.
No, Your Honor, it's got nothing to do
I mean,
with
a bad mother or a bad father doesn't deserve to have their child shot.
No, Your
Right?
Honor, it's got nothing to do with Miss West being a good mother or a bad mother. And in fact, I think medical records show that the child had not been abused prior to death. That's not the issue here. But the issue is that the mother has made some rather bizarre statements. Now, one explanation for them may have been that she was suffering from a psychotic episode. Another one might have been it was a product of use or abuse of drugs or combinations thereof. Another explanation is she's taunting the police department. Another explanation is she's subconsciously or unconsciously projecting her own role in her child's death onto these as yet unidentified attackers, Your Honor. But surely the court could grasp the logical relevance, coincidence in a mother who starves her own children, describing the killer as someone who starved their children to buy drugs, which also actually is borne out by the evidence in this case. That is an odd and chilling combination, and we think that what the court is doing here, with all due respect, and with all due respect to Ms. DeConomo, is the court is going beyond its role as the...
Well, he makes an objection, and then the court's role is, I've got to decide whether or not to sustain or overrule. So,
I understand
I
that,
can't do that without having you state your basis for this this is not the most usual situation that we deal with from day to day.
Well, I think we could all agree about that. I've never seen testimony like this before, Your Honor. I mean, it's just incredible that she comes in and tells the police, that these people, we don't even know who they are yet. They haven't been identified. That they've been starved because their mother was going out buying crack instead of buying them food, when it turns out, coincidentally, that she had a drug problem and was buying crack and not feeding her children at the same time when she was in New Jersey. It's her life projected onto the shooter and his family in this case. It's bizarre. It's bizarre, but Your Honor, I think your role is, you do have a gatekeeping function, but I think under the rules of evidence, the general rule is, if it tends to be probative, logically relevant, that it comes in. And it is highly relevant in this case.
I have certainly a balancing test. I mean, again, I have to, what you're asking the court to do then is to find that this character evidence, that she's a bad mother, somehow then is relevant to show that she committed this murder.
Well, Your Honor, if it's admissible for impeachment purposes, it's an academic discussion.
Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to let you ask her anything, any of these bizarre comments she made to the police. You can cross-examine her on these bizarre comments. You can ask her all day long till midnight tonight, or whenever the jury says that they're tired of hearing, we can go home. You can ask her every bizarre question she asks, and but I'm not going to this time. I do not make the jump that I'm going to allow you to go back 12 years ago into defects into a matter she had with the custody of her children, defects 12 years ago. All right.
Donna, what about this statement that was made in the questioning by defense counsel that you starved your child, that's still in the jury's mind, and the last thing they heard when they walked out tonight? I mean, that,
I'll make a motion that I've sustained the objection. They discard the last question of counsel.
Thank you.
That's all right.
All right, for the jury. please. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jury sustain the state's objection or disregard the counsel's last question. Mr. Goff, you may continue.
Ma'am, you also said at 2:05:45 of the interview, I hope you drop dead, bitch, you fucking whore murderer. I hope that they catch you and put you the fuck away, bitch. Who were you referring to?
I don't recall saying that.
Possibly you referring to yourself?
No.
You remember approximately an hour and 58 minutes in an interview saying he probably practiced in the backyard. Projects probably. Maybe the ones behind Prince Street.
I don't understand the question.
Do you not recall saying out loud while you were in the interview room that he, that would be the attacker, probably practiced, I presume, shooting in the backyard? Projects probably, maybe the ones behind Prince Street.
It's possible.
You were referring to yourself?
No, I was referring to him.
Well, I'm curious. A moment ago, when I was showing you what was marked for identification purposes as States 53, I guess I'll come back up to you. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
May.
Ma'am, a few minutes ago, when I asked you about Hopkins Homes, the housing project with the light green, emerald green push pin in it, 3 blocks, approximately 3 or 4 blocks southwest of the shooting and 1 less block southwest of your home, you said you weren't familiar with that housing project.
That's correct.
And yet, the northern border of that housing project is London Street, is it not? You see this cluster of buildings here. You'd agree that the northern border of that, based on the roof lines, is London Street.
I was suspecting that he didn't care who he hurted.
Thank you, ma'am. But in answer to my question, a moment ago, when I was asking you about the possibility that the suspects involved in this shooting went southwest to the Hopkins Homes public housing project, you said you weren't familiar with it.
I said he went towards Albany Street. They ran.
Yes. But when I also followed up and asked you about this public housing project down here, you expressed that you weren't familiar with it. You don't recall that?
I remember that.
You don't recall saying earlier when I asked you about the post office box at this housing complex that you didn't go there?
No, I never did.
And yet, ma'am, even though you never go there, you're referring to that housing project for which the southern border is Prince Street while you're talking in the interview room.
I believe that's where they were coming from.
Okay. Now your testimony today is you believe your attackers were coming from Hopkins Homes.
Yes.
Okay. Prior to this evening, you've never said that to anyone.
No, that's correct.
You didn't tell it to the police after your child was shot and the police were asking for your help to find the people that committed this crime. You didn't mention anything about Hopkins Homes, did you?
They mentioned to me that they had cameras over there, so I'm sure that they had the evidence.
You didn't mention anything about Hopkins Homes or the possibility that these subjects went southwest to Prince Street, did you? Did you?
Excuse me?
You didn't mention to the police when the shooting took place and they responded, you didn't say anything about Hopkins Homes or Prince Street. You didn't say anything about people running southwest, did you?
I told them they ran down London Street.
You told them they ran east down London Street, not west.
I never said a directional coordinate. I said they ran down London Street.
And were you not here earlier when they played your own reenactment video? Well, maybe I'm wrong. Were you not here? Did not they play that reenactment video with you rolling the cart down the street? Weren't you here for that? That was during your testimony today.
Right.
And in that video, you're saying they ran eastward on London.
I said they ran down London.
But you were pointing to the east and you were looking to the east.
They were heading towards Albany Street.
Why would you withhold this information now to the very middle of this trial?
I'm not familiar with north, east, south, and west. I don't know how to read a compass. I just know street names.
Ma'am, do you know Joe Lang?
The name sounds familiar.
The name sounds familiar because he's a young man involved in this case. And you've heard his name before from the district attorney.
I received a copy of the indictment.
And you saw Mr. Lang hanging out in the witness room with the other witnesses before he testified, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And it would surprise you to learn that Joe Lang lives in Hopkins Homes?
Your Honor, I object to the form of the question of surprise. It's irrelevant whether this witness...
I'll withdraw and
is surprised.
rephrase.
No, let me finish
I
my...
sustain as to the form of the question.
Ma'am, you know Joe Lang, don't you?
No, I don't have many friends.
And you knew that Joe Lang lived in Hopkins Homes.
No.
And you knew that Joe Lang do you know whether Joe Lang testified that he woke up in Hopkins Homes the morning of this shooting?
No.
Did you see Joe Lang walking by at the time of the shooting?
I did not know his name.
And you don't know Dominic Lang either.
No, I don't.
You just coincidentally picked him out of all those photos that you were shown on the evening of March 21st. That was a coincidence, right?
I guess so.
Ma'am, were you present when the Langs practiced shooting a firearm?
No, I wasn't.
You and Mr. Santiago weren't present when they practiced?
I can't speak for Mr. Santiago.
That wouldn't explain the gunshot residue on both your hands?
The police never suggested that.
Ma'am, the police didn't suggest it because you never told them there was any connection to Hopkins Homes. The first you mentioned Hopkins Homes was today.
They never suggested there was GSR on our hands. They never incurred that we were a suspect.
You didn't read about the GSR in the media?
I don't believe I did.
Ma'am, do you remember talking about suing the police department for searching your house during this interview?
No, I don't recall that.
You don't remember talking to yourself in the witness room about suing the police?
No, I don't recall that.
Well, you'd agree that there was a conversation before the officer stepped out about searching your house.
I don't recall that until we arrived at my home.
You don't recall expressing concern about the search of your house?
No.
You don't recall expressing concern about the possibility that it would be damaged?
At my home, I asked the police if they were going to throw things all over or tear my furniture.
But before you got to the house, when you were still at the Glenn County Police Department, you expressed concern about the items in your house.
No, I don't recall that.
And Angela Smith said, let's stop, we'll go ahead, we'll call the officers right now to make sure they treat your house gently.
I don't recall that.
And then you're sitting there speculating about how to sue the police department.
I never recalled that.
These officers never did or said anything to you to suggest in any way that this police department would treat you anything other than courteously and fairly, did they?
I didn't understand the question.
You'd agree that there was no reason to even be thinking about suing the police based on anything they said or did up to that point.
I was very distraught. I wasn't thinking about the police.
Is it possible you were suffering from some kind of psychotic episode or under the influence of some combination of medications?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered several times. She said she was not suffering from a psychotic episode, and said it, and said it, and said it.
Dane?
Ma'am, do you belong to an organized church?
Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant. What in the world does her religion, or whether she belongs to an organized church, have to do with the issues in this case? I don't see the relevancy
I
of
can
that.
explain. I can put it out right now. We can go to sidebars, whatever
No,
makes you
I don't want any
prefer.
sidebars. I don't understand the relevance to the issues in this case as to whether this person belongs to, a witness belongs to a church. It's incidental.
Go
to
to
the-
sidebar. I'd rather put the head notes.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. When the state's ready, I'll proceed, Your Honor.
Good.
I have to give him a chair.
What is that? Oh, no, go ahead and drink it.
Ma'am, do you recall engaging the police officers in a somewhat unusual conversation about life and death?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling the police officers that you wanted to live on earth forever?
Well, I believed that God gave us, life to, live everlasting.
Okay, so it's part of your religious beliefs that you are entitled to life everlasting on earth.
Yes.
And you were trying to explain to the detectives about baby Antonio and why he's not going to live life on earth.
I never said that.
Did you tell the police that God didn't want your son to suffer on earth?
I never said that.
You never said that God didn't want your son to suffer on earth.
I don't recall that.
Okay. Well, you would agree to me, however tragic, untimely, and premature, that your son's death was, relatively speaking, a merciful one.
Objection, Your Honor. On the question of relevancy, what possible relevance to the guilt or innocence of these defendants is it whether this child was killed mercifully? I don't see that as relevant.
Your Honor, it's logically relevant to whether the killer may have had a pre-existing relationship with the child as opposed to being a stranger.
So it's better if you're a stranger, it's not merciful, but if you had a pre-existing relationship, it could be a merciful killing. Is that what I'm hearing? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I don't think I actually said anything like that, Your Honor. I simply asked the question. I believe the question was that you would agree that the child's death was merciful, however untimely, tragic, and premature. You'll
Objection
recall
irrelevant, Your
similar
Honor.
questions coming up with the medical examiner in
I'll
this
let you ask
case.
that question. Overruled.
Could you repeat the question?
Ma'am, you would agree that your son's death, however tragic and premature and undeserved, was nevertheless merciful.
No, I don't believe that.
Would
I
agree-
was a good mother.
agree that the child's death was instantaneous.
Objection, Your Honor. How in the world, unless she's a medical doctor, can she know whether it was instantaneous or not?
She was there, Your Honor. She watched her child die.
Well, we know that.
I sustain the objection.
Ma'am, was there anything of value in your purse on the day of the shooting?
Just my identification.
Can't think of any reason why people would be willing to kill to get your purse.
Identity theft?
But you don't have any bank accounts.
Well, I've heard they can steal Social Security numbers.
What would your Social Security number be worth?
I've heard that people can open accounts with it. It's been done.
Ma'am, did you not suggest to the police on several occasions during the interview on March 21st that you did not believe that this shooting was a random act?
Yes.
Told the police at approximately an hour and 51 into the interview that it may have been premeditated, that somebody may have known your route.
That's correct.
And you said at 1:57 into the interview, maybe someone saw us shopping at Walmart.
I'm sorry?
And you said at approximately an hour and 57 minutes into the interview that someone may have seen you shopping at Walmart.
I don't recall that.
And at 1:48, did you suggest that someone has a vendetta against the family, your family?
No, I don't recall that.
Well, you would agree that all those statements would be inconsistent with a random act.
I said it was a possibility.
And in fact, you told you had the discussion with your daughter Ashley that someone in the family may have owed a debt to
Debt.
certain kinds of people.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay if it has anything to do with what was said to her by a third person.
No. If she said that to her daughter, it's not hearsay at all.
It's not how I understood the question. She said you had a
Repeat the
discussion.
question.
I'll rephrase the question. Ma'am, did you not talk with your daughter about the possibility that someone in your family owed a debt? We'll just leave it at that. Owed a debt.
I may have said something.
That this shooting may have been related to a debt owed.
I may have said something to that effect. My baby's daddy made lots of friends in that town.
Lots of friends who weren't very nice people.
It's possible.
Ma'am, did you not tell the police that your ex had drug problems?
He had, prior to meeting me, he said.
He said yes, that he did.
Yes.
Okay. You also told the police that your son died heroically trying to prevent a drug overdose.
I never said that.
You never told the police that your son died trying to stop a woman from being overdosed, OD'd by some other man?
Oh, you mean my older son?
Your older son. I'm sorry. Yes, your older son.
Yes, that's correct.
And you've already indicated that your neighbor was evicted for smoking crack cocaine?
Your objection, Your Honor, asked and answered at least 6 times about the neighbor and the crack. We've heard this.
Okay.
And ma'am, you have accused Mr. Santiago at times of going across the street to get high with a woman who lives across the
He
street.
lived across the
Objection, Your
street.
Honor. It is irrelevant that Mr. Santiago, if he did, got high, went to see a prostitute, to the guilt or innocence of this defendant.
I'll move on, Your Honor.
Dane.
Ma'am, did you tell the police that you studied the drug trade in Brunswick?
I don't recall saying that.
You don't specifically recall using the word studied the drug trade in Brunswick?
No, I said there may be a drug problem in Brunswick.
Well, we'll get back to that in a minute. But you never used the word study in reference to the drug trade.
I studied about drugs.
And when the police asked you what you meant by study the drug trade, you then told them that it was part of your studies in school.
That's correct.
Now, your studies in Washington, D.C., your psychology studies in Washington, D.C., focused on the drug trade in Brunswick, Georgia?
It's a sociology course. It spoke about people's behaviors.
And we all like to think that Brunswick is a famous town, but you specifically studied in your your sociology class in Washington, D.C., the drug trade in the city of Brunswick, Georgia. That's your testimony?
Your Honor, I object. What is the relevance to the guilt or innocence of the accused in this case as to whether or not when she was in Washington, she studied about the drug trade in Brunswick? I don't see the relevance.
Your Honor, the witness's repeated references to the drug trade in her statements to the police certainly are consistent with the defense theory about her mental state at the time of the interview and at the time of the shootings that day.
I don't see how, Your Honor, I still don't see how studying in Washington about the drug trade in Brunswick has anything to do with the shooting and killing of the child.
Overrule the objection. He has a thorough sit across the end. He can probably think that he said to the police.
Ma'am, you would agree that your sociology class in Washington, D.C. did not specifically study the drug trade in Brunswick, Georgia.
I never said it did. I said it discussed behaviors of people in groups.
But not those in Brunswick, Georgia.
I never said that.
So what did you mean when you said you were studying the drug trade in Brunswick?
I don't recall saying it. I said I studied about street drugs, but in my other school.
And in response to all your references to drugs in the course of your interview, at approximately 48:30 into the interview, the detectives asked you, do you know any drug addicts in town?
Is that a question, Your Honor?
I thought it was a question. At approximately 48:30 into the interview, did the detectives not ask you, after all these drug discussions, do you know any drug addicts in town? Or do you know any drug addicts?
They may have said something to that effect.
And you evaded the question.
No, I don't know many people.
Really? That's your answer today?
Yes.
Well, in March, your answer was the town is full of them, and you try and stay away from them.
My neighbor was on drugs. We found drug paraphernalia out in the yard, and their house was searched by police and K-9 unit.
And you added that the drug people were getting too close to you?
I was worried that they lived next door, yes.
And then Detective Tyndall, trying to get you to open up about your knowledge of drugs, asked you or told you, or started to tell you rather, that they're not all bad people.
I don't recall that.
And then you cut her off because you disagreed with her.
I just remember telling her that I studied about substance abuse in Ashworth College in Georgia.
And then at another point in the interview, you said, I'm not going to give in to the drug trade in this SHIT city.
I don't recall that.
Well, okay, so because you can't recall it, you can't tell us what you were thinking when you said it.
I don't recall saying it.
Ma'am, you were evasive when she asked you if you knew any drug addicts, weren't you?
Well, I can't be specific who they are.
Ma'am, you are in fact a drug addict.
No, I'm not. I've never done drugs.
You've never done drugs.
No.
You've never done crack.
No, I drink sometimes.
You drink a lot of Bacardi?
Some.
There was a time when you drank a lot of Bacardi, wasn't there?
Years ago, I may have drank past my limit once or twice.
Why would an 8-year-old know how to spell Bacardi?
Excuse me?
Why would an 8-year-old know how to spell Bacardi?
Objection, Your Honor. What
Referring
8-year?
to an 8-year-old.
I don't understand the
I'll
foundation of
move
the
on.
question. An 8-year-old, what 8-year-old to spell Bacardi?
Ma'am, were you on cocaine on the day that your child died?
No. And I never starved my children either. My husband bought a lot of the groceries.
Ma'am, do you know a Roderick Johnson?
That name don't sound familiar.
You engage in sexual relations with him?
Objection, Your Honor. That is outrageously asked. It is irrelevant as to whether, for the truthfulness or lack of truthfulness of this witness to inquire into something like that, that clearly puts her character in evidence on a matter that is collateral and cannot possibly have anything to do with the guilt or innocence of those two defendants.
Your Honor, given, of course, aside from the fact that she's opened the door at this point pretty clearly into her drug use, it's certainly relevant, Your Honor. She is repeatedly referencing in this interview crack whores, many of whom she's speculating have some relationship to the shooters in this case, when in fact she is describing herself, Your Honor. And we, as the court is well aware from the motions on file, we have a witness who's made a statement to that effect. This is not a fishing expedition, and Mr. Economo is well aware of that evidence.
No, there is no... who said that she's a drug addict? Because she takes prescription medications? That makes her a drug addict? He asked her about cocaine. She said no. Now he wants to talk about her sexual history. All that is putting her character into evidence. Ask something that has to deal with whether she knows how to tell the truth or whether she's a liar. Ask whether she's got motives to be biased in favor of the government. But don't ask questions about what her sexual proclivities are. That has nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of Elkins and his mother.
Your Honor, she said that she never used drugs, and she's also spontaneously, voluntarily, and without question, said she never starved her children. Those doors are all open.
Oh, I think as to any kind of sexual history, I want to sustain the objection.
Did you do crack cocaine with a Roderick Johnson?
No.
Have you ever made a crack pipe?
No.
Did you not possess crack pipes in the state of New Jersey?
No.
Did your son and daughter not find crack pipes in your house?
Never.
Did they not specifically find crack pipes with steel wool used to make the filter?
No.
Do you know why you would have shredded steel wool in your apartment?
Because we had rats.
Well, you know that there's more than one use for steel wool. Am I correct?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
You're not
Other than
familiar-
clean oven.
You're not familiar with the use of shredded steel wool to make crack pipes?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
Well, why did you possess shredded steel wool?
I explained that we had rats and there were spaces to put the steel wool in so that they wouldn't get in. It was very damp under the house and the landlord couldn't get rid of them.
So you don't deny that you had shredded steel wool. You say that it was to protect yourself against rats.
That's correct.
You know it has another purpose.
No, I didn't know that.
And it's just a coincidence that the crack pipes found by your children in your house were made with steel wool.
Objection, Your Honor. There is no evidence that her children found crack pipes in her house. And she said no, that she used the steel wool to keep rats out.
Any objection?
Ma'am, did you not admit to your daughter, Ashley Glassy, that you were using crack cocaine as recently as January of this year?
Your Honor,
No.
I have never asked for a sidebar because I don't like to do that unless the court orders it. But I would like the jury to be excused right now because I would like to approach the bench and speak with the court.
All right.
All rise for the jury. Be seated, please. Please be seated.
Your Honor, if I may do so from here now that the jury is out. Your Honor, I would like to note that the cross-examination of this witness began at 3:02 this afternoon. We have taken breaks. I realize that, maybe 3, but it is now 10 minutes after 7. So she has been subject to cross-examination off and on for about 4 hours. I'd like to call the attention of the court to 2 rules. One is Rule 611 and the other is Rule 623 of the Rules of Evidence. The court shall exercise, this is 611, the court shall exercise reasonable control over the mode and order of interrogating witnesses and presenting evidence so as to, 1, make the interrogation and presentation effective for the ascertainment of truth, 2, avoid needless consumption of time, and 3, protect witnesses from harassment or undue embarrassment. Then goes on to talks about a witness may be cross-examined on any matter relevant to the proceeding. I also call the court's attention in conjunction with 611 to Rule 623, which says, it shall be, that's on page 173 of Carlson, it shall be the right, not option, but the right of a witness to be examined only as to relevant matters and to be protected from improper questions and from harsh or insulting demeanor. I think that in his zeal, which I in 623. I understand in Georgia that the witness, that a defendant, and the state for that matter, has a right to a thorough and sifting cross-examination. But we have sifted this witness, and we have been thorough with this witness, or defense counsel has, for something in the neighborhood of 4 hours. And while I recognize her importance in this case, the court has the authority under these 2 rules to protect this witness, because she's got a right, from a harsh or insulting demeanor and improper questions. We have also, and from undue embarrassment. We have, Mr. Goff has interrogated this witness time and again over drugs, trying to get into sex, trying to get into the abuse of her children from a prior union, having allegedly starved those children. Now that she's smoking crack pipes and keeps steel wool in her house to make pipes, and on and on and on. I submit to the court that it's time to end it. It's time to draw this to a conclusion. Notwithstanding the right to a thorough and sifting cross-examination, we've achieved that in this case. And now it's gotten to the point where we are now inventing questions to embarrass Miss West. The defense is, I should say. That's what's happening in this case. And I ask the court to exercise its right to control these proceedings under Rule 611 and 623 and stop it.
Mr. Economo's done, Your Honor,
I'm done.
Your Honor, I can well understand the state's concerns here, but let's be clear on the record. We have been suggesting from day one that the state refused to investigate the backgrounds of their key witnesses, and I am sorry that it turns out that their witnesses were not who they thought they were, but that was the state's election. We have begged them, B-E-G-G-E-D, begged them to do background investigations on their key witnesses. I don't know what more I could have done other than get on the ground and bark with my tongue out, Judge. I am sorry that we had to do it for them, and I am sorry about the results. No one would wish anyone to go through this kind of lifestyle. However, we are where we are, Your Honor. The witness voluntarily, spontaneously, not in response to any question we actually asked, said, "I never starved my children." Under Georgia law, old evidence and new, that opens the door. So we don't even have to worry anymore about whether it's impeachment or how it ties into the other bizarre things the witness has said. That door's open. The witness also volunteered that she has never used drugs, Your Honor, which would be consistent with the same statement she made 2 weeks ago at the last hearing. It's not like there's anything new in her statement, but the state has always known that those statements were untrue. As far as whether or not my client can receive a fair trial, constitutionally, under the Confrontation Clause, Sixth Amendment, and the state provision, Your Honor, I don't see how it could be any more relevant that someone who has lost a child to a shooting under bizarre circumstances and engages in bizarre statements on the day of the shooting that go on for some 2 hours certainly raises the question as to what the witness was under the influence of. And since the identifications are being made in the same time frame, it is impossible to sever out the witness's ongoing substance abuse issues from her identification of my client, and it's also impossible to sever that out from motive, bias, and credibility. It's also impossible to sever that out from whether or not she had a role, whatever it might have been, in the death of her own son rather than my client. Your Honor, if this evidence isn't relevant in this case, then I just couldn't see how it could be relevant in any case. And while I well understand that it lengthens the trial, and we share the court's concern and the state's concern about that, and we take no relish in going through these things, Your Honor, but they are highly relevant. It would be ineffective for us not to address those. And if this court, even if this court wanted to address it at this point, I think under the rules of evidence, the court's discretion is somewhat limited. But there's no question at this point, if we're not allowed to go into those two issues, this case will come back. Now, the court, as the court has said before, that's the Supreme Court's job. But at the same time, Your Honor, as the judicial officer conducting this trial, the doors are opened, the evidence is clearly admissible, even before getting, as you'll remember, we still haven't gotten our recess to go find the specific impeachment questions. But it's coming in, whether it's coming in under an impeachment or for all the other reasons we've already discussed, it's clearly highly relevant and at the very center of this case. So notwithstanding all Mr. Economo's protestations, we're ready to proceed.
All right, we're going to take a recess. We may be recessing for the night. I want y'all to look at what's the citation of Scott versus the state. I had both sides look at that case this evening.
281, Georgia 373.
I'll be in recess for about 5 or 10 minutes, maybe for the evening.
Can someone pull that?
Whatever she had happen to her, and I think that's already established.
Has she got any kind of, the records you've got?
I don't
Is
have
it
any.
like a gateway or something?
It's gonna be from Savannah Memorial.
Or she was treated for stroke? I mean, she's not
Yeah,
ever been
and then
seen
she
like
was-
a mental health provider.
Not that I know
Bruce.
of. Okay, I'll talk to her about it. I don't think, I mean, you know, I wish she would've,
Well,
Yes.
4 months ago.
yes,
3 months ago.
yeah.